All right, how are we doing today? So I wanted to put together a nice slideshow seminar kind of format for Green Reading 101. I know all of us want to make more putts, shoot lower scores, and a big part of that is getting the ball in the hole as quickly as possible. When it comes to reading greens, hitting good putts, we've got some information contained within this presentation that will allow you to master different areas that you may not have thought of before, or we might bring in some concepts that you may not have thought of before. There's no doubt that if you're able to apply these, they will definitely help. So with this material here, our focus is going to be on a few different areas, which are going to be these key areas of green reading. So we're going to talk about visuals, we're going to talk about feels, the clock system, apex, start line or start target, speed, and then what are some different drills or tips that we can use to make more putts. So we're not going to go into the depth of percent of slope and stemp meter and things like that definitely have an impact on putting and green reading. For most of us, if we can master these areas here and bring some awareness to these areas here, we're going to see an immediate improvement in our putting. So the first area is going to be visuals. Visuals are, if we think about our senses, right, our sense of sight. You walk up to the green, you look at your putt that you have. What does it look like it's going to do? As you're walking to the green and you look at some of the slopes around the green, what do those slopes look like? What do they tell you? So if we look at this image, for example, that we have here, just from looking at this, let's say you have a putt from about 15 feet stage right of the hole. From just looking at this, what does it look like it's going to do versus if we had a putt from back over here towards the front of the green or a putt from this side of the hole? We can see a little bit of slope and break in there just from this picture. And that's going to give us some ideas of what this might do. Now, if we're actually on this course, we're walking up to the green, obviously you get to see the slopes a little bit differently. Something else we want to also pay attention to is what do the slopes around the green look like? We don't know, obviously from this photo, we don't know what's behind us, but we do know that if we're walking up to this green, we've got a low area over here, and this green is generally elevated. So that's going to let us know that possibly on the other side of this, what looks like a ridge, a lot of stuff could break towards this low area. Another thing to look for, where are the drains in that area, especially if you're on a course that has some grainy Bermuda kind of grass. Look for those drains around the green, because that'll also tell you if we get a big storm or a bunch of water hits this green, right? A bunch of rain hits this green, where's that water going to run off? That's going to have an impact on where the grain is going to go if we're on courses that are going to have a bit grainier greens. Now, if you're somewhere that has bent grass greens or a little further north, not really as much of an issue as if we're down south on some Bermuda and Bermuda type greens. Something else to look for, in addition to what does the break look like it's going to do, is does the putt look like it's going to be uphill or downhill? There are some really great designers out there who are really good at tricking you and making you think the putt looks one way when it actually could go another way. So the first thing that we want to bring some awareness to is looking at visually what does it look like it's going to do, and using that information to start guiding what we think this putt is going to do. Now, we can look at it all we want, but as I said, designers get paid a lot of money to make a putt look one way when it actually does the complete opposite. So that's where our feels start to come in. So what does the putt feel like it's going to do? So we looked at it and we have an idea of what we think it's going to do based off of how it looks. But if we do something like aim point, so we got this photo here is someone doing aim point. If we were to actually straddle the line and feel where the pressure is on our feet, do we feel like it's breaking how it looks? So if I feel more pressure on my right foot, that lets me know that the putt is going to break to my right. If I feel more weight on my left foot, it's going to break to the left. If I'm feeling more weight in my heels as I straddle that line, likely going to be an uphill putt, versus if I'm feeling the weight in my toes or more pressure in my toes, probably going to be a downhill putt. Then we start pairing those together. I feel it more on my right foot and more towards the toes of my right foot, probably going to be downhill breaking to the right. So what does it feel like it's going to do for straddling that line? If we stand over the ball and we address it, what does it feel like it's going to do? That can often give us a lot of information. When we're standing over the ball, we think this putt is going to be a slight right to left putt, but as we get over it, it actually feels like our weight's shifting forward a little bit. It almost feels like that putt might go the other way as we stand over it. Something that we need to be aware of and we need to take into account, because if we're feeling those sensations, it's very possible that those sensations are correct. A lot of times in golf, as you know, our feel and real are often very different. So what we think something's going to do versus what it actually might do can be very, very different. So we've used the visual feedback of walking up to the green, seeing what the green looks like, seeing what the area around the green looks like. We're using our feet and our body and our perception of our body in space and time to get a feel for what this putt might do. And then also, what does the situation dictate? So if we have a putt that's 30 feet downhill, breaking to the right, are we in a situation that's going to possibly make us hit a more aggressive or more conservative putt? Do we need to make this putt to win the club championship? Do we need to two putt this to win the hole or tie the hole with our friends on the little Nassau that we got going on? Whatever the situation kind of dictates may dictate how you feel about the breaking that putt and what you're seeing and feeling with that putt. So just keep that in mind, that situations can alter your strategy as well as how you're feeling looking at your putt. So we've walked up the green, we've seen what we think it's going to do, we've felt what we think it's going to do, and hopefully those two match up. If they don't, then we need to think about it for an extra second, because what we don't want to do is hit a putt that's not confident. We're way better off reading it incorrectly and hitting a confident putt than reading it perfectly and hitting a non-confident putt or a non-committed putt. So we always want to make sure that what we're seeing, what we're feeling match up. And if they're not, that's where, if you look at, Tiger Woods is a great example. We watch him read a green and he's looking at a putt from every single angle because he wants to make sure that what he sees and what he feels with that putt match up and allow him to choose the right line, hit a confident putt, and hopefully make it. So we need to match those things up. And if they're not matched up, then we just need to take a little bit of extra time to make sure we're feeling confident and comfortable with it. Now, as you're playing with your friends out on the course and they may have a pretty quick pace of play, you may feel like, oh, I'm holding up the group if I take this extra time. That's okay. Every now and then it's okay to take a little extra time, especially if it's an important putt that the situation dictates for. But a good time to really dial in your process and what you're seeing is on the practice green. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. But if you're able to practice reading greens, not just practicing hitting putts, but practicing reading greens and seeing breaks and identifying feels versus what you're seeing, it'll make it way quicker when you get on the green and you're playing that game with your friends, or you're in a tournament, or whatever the situation may be that you're on the course. You're able to then get up there and more quickly identify what the break is going to be, what you see, what you feel, match that up, and then get rocking and rolling. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the clock system. So essentially, the clock system is going to be, what part of the cup do we want that ball to enter? Is that ball, based off of what we're seeing and feeling, is that ball likely to enter directly in the center of the cup at 6 o'clock? Or does it have quite a bit of break and maybe it's entering on the side door at 3 o'clock? Or flip side, 9 o'clock, right? Where is that ball going to enter the hole? Very rarely we're going to have that ball enter in anything beyond this 9 and 3, unless it has a very significant amount of break. But what we want to do is, now that we have got our visuals and our feels lined up, that's going to give us a really, really, really good idea of where this ball should enter the cup. Or another way to approach that is, where do you want the ball to enter the cup? Because that can alter some stuff that we're going to talk about here. Do you like to see the ball go in just falling on the side door? Do you like to see that ball slamming into the back of the cup and then dropping? These are going to impact where that ball will enter the cup. It's going to impact the speed, the apex, the start line, all that kind of stuff. So now that we've got a good visual of what we think is going to happen with the putt, we've got a good feel for what we think is going to happen with the cup, let's go ahead and define where on the cup, if we imagine as a clock, that ball is going to enter. And that'll help us as we then look at our apex and our start line. So next is going to be our apex. This is a great representation if you've watched any PGA Tour event. They show this all the time. So we got the hole over here, and we've got two different lines. We've got this black line, which represents a firm putt, and we've got this yellow line, which they're going to represent as a lag putt. I like to also think of an additional line, which would be a straight line from the cup to our ball. So no break at all. If it was just a dead straight line from this 32-foot putt, what does that just straight on line look like? And what we're then going to do is we're going to compare the high point of this curve to our straight line. So if we start with the black curve is going to be hard to see, but it should be very similar compared to this yellow one, just because his head is kind of in the way. But the apex is likely somewhere where his head is. And if we look over here on this yellow line, if we had a straight line drawn from cup to ball, we would see that this high point is going to be somewhere out in here. This apex is going to be somewhere out in here. So now this is a very, very critical part of this that we need to understand and grasp and conceptualize, because this is going to make or break your putting. Pun intended with making putts there, right? If we can identify and visualize what that apex is going to be, we've just done a massive thing for ourselves. We've created a visual arc of where this ball should roll through to get to the hole. What most golfers do, and where most golfers get this wrong, is they look at that apex and they say, that's the high point of the break, so I will aim there because that's the highest point of this putt. So they think that they need to aim at the apex. As we're going to find out, that's not the case. So if we take a look here, when we're picking that correct start line or target, here we've got a visual representation of this left-right putt where the apex of our break is identified by this blue X here. If we were to draw a straight line, our aim point or our start line or our start target at that apex, we see that we're aiming at the second tee here. What's going to happen if we aim at that second tee there is we're actually going to miss this putt low very frequently unless we're like ripping it with the speed and hitting it more firm than we need to. As we can see represented by this green arrow here, we actually want to aim outside of that apex because there's going to be this little bit of break that we need to account for between apex and where we're actually starting from. So let's go back to this image here on apex. We have identified, let's call this yellow line apex right here. If we were to hit this putt with the speed intended to roll along this line, and we aimed it at this point, and we drew a straight line between where we're starting and where we're aiming, we see that already through this area, right where the mouse is going, that we're already below this yellow line. Does that make sense? So if this yellow line represents the ideal path of this golf ball, and if we aim it at that high point of the path, we see that in actuality, our ball is actually going to start inside of the yellow line and not on the yellow line. So we need to actually aim it a bit outside of that to account for the bit of break that's going to happen between here and this identified apex. So this is crucial in making sure that you're picking the right reads. This is going to feel really weird. When you get on the green, you're going to feel like you're aiming very far away from the hole, further than you think is comfortable and possible for that putt to actually go in. And you're probably going to have some holes where you 3-putt initially because you're so confused by this concept. That's okay. Get comfortable with it and know that when we choose our apex, we need to aim outside of our apex, as represented by this image here. If we don't aim outside of our apex, we're not going to be matching our speed. We're not going to match our speed to our line properly. And if we do match speed to line properly, we're going to miss the putt. So there's a chance you can still make the putt by aiming at the apex. However, your speed is not going to match what you're actually trying to visualize and conceptualize. So you're going to be hitting your putts firmer than what you think you need to based off of the break you're seeing. If the ball gets in the hole and you're making putts, that's fine. But what's going to happen, as we're going to see when we talk about speed, is we're going to reduce the probability that the ball goes in the hole the firmer we're hitting it. So when we talk about speed of putt, what we want to do is based off of all the information we've looked at, how it looks, how it feels, what's the apex, where do we want it to enter in on the cup, on the clock system, and then where's our start line. Like based off of all of these factors, that's going to let us know how firm or soft do we need to hit this putt. Now, ideally, all of our putts are rolling past the hole at about the same rate, no matter if it's a 3-footer that we missed or a 30-footer that we missed. Either way, that ball is rolling a consistent amount past the hole. The reason for that is the capture size of the hole. So the capture size is essentially the effective size of the cup based off of the speed that the ball is rolling at. So this image over here is going to show us if a ball rolls 6 inches, half a foot past the hole, 1 foot past, 2 foot past, 3 foot, 4 foot, and then this last one, kind of hard to see there, is going to be 5 foot. And this gray area is going to represent what our capture size is. So as we can see, the further the ball goes past the hole, the smaller the effective size is. We have to hit a putt that's far more precise. Whereas if we have less speed, the less distance beyond the hole the ball is going, the larger the hole becomes, the more margin for error we're going to have, and the more putts we're going to potentially make. So when you think about a lip out, let's think about a putt that, a 5-footer that you decide, I'm going to ram this sucker in, I'm going to take all the break out, and you hit the lip and it doesn't go down because you put 3 extra feet of speed on that putt. You still hit the hole, but you didn't hit the exact center of the hole. Therefore, the ball did not stay down in the cup and it lipped out. We want to make sure that we're matching speed to line. And if we go back to our apex visual here, this gives us a good representation of that firm putt. Let's say this is the one that goes 5 feet past the hole. And this one's one that's going to go 6 inches past the hole. We have all this room in the middle for all those different types of putt, but we need to make sure that if we have that putt entering in at 3 o'clock on the clock system, which is going to be represented by this yellow line, that we have a speed that matches that, which would likely be one of these 1 foot or half a foot past the hole speeds. If we don't, so let's say we choose this line, this is our target, yet we hit a putt that goes 5 feet past the hole, represented by this black line here. You can just imagine if we pulled this black line and moved this initial start to match the yellow line, we would see that this black line finishes somewhere out here. We would miss the putt high and long. We would just send it past the cup. So we need to make sure that we're matching our speed to our lines. Once we've identified everything that we want, we need to then choose, based off of what we just seen, how far are we hitting this putt? And we need to look at, what's a perfect speed? And then we look at something like the capture size of the hole to kind of choose that. So we can make, from a probability perspective, the most amount of putts if we're hitting it only 6 inches past the hole. I think that's a really, really good speed to work with. It maximizes the size of the hole. And what it also does is it removes any chance of a putt that maybe just dies over the edge. So a putt that goes 0 inches past the hole, or a putt that, gets up to the edge, hangs there and falls. And what can happen with those is if you watch a ball roll, a putt roll, and you watch the last few inches of that putt as the ball is settling, it can take some weird little bumps and hobbles as it settles due to the grain and the contours of the green. So if we have a putt that we're just trying to creep over the edge so we can really maximize the size of the hole, we're going to start adding in a little bit of chance with that ball potentially bumping and doing weird things. If you watched the Farmers out at Torrey Pines this year, Will Zalatoris had a putt on 18 for the win, and we see this happen. A putt that breaks left to right, it gets to the hole, and because it's lacking a little bit of pace, as it's settling, instead of continuing its momentum to roll forward into the hole as it appeared it should have, it settled and actually bumped a little bit left. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure that we have just enough pace for that ball to get to the cup without kind of oscillating, but not so much pace that we're hitting it multiple feet past the hole and drastically reducing the effective size of the hole or the captured size of the hole. So speed and line are going to be our very, very, very critical components here. If we're not matching those up, we're not making any putts. We can have perfect speed and terrible lines, and the ball will not go in. And we can have perfect lines with terrible speed, and the ball is never going to go in. So we need to start matching those up. The way we do that is by going through different drills and games that are going to really dial in what you're feeling and seeing. So some different green reading drills that we can do are to use things like a ghost hole. If you have like a coaster or something like that, you can use that. Or what I like to do is when I show up to the practice screen, just find an old hole where the cup used to be, and they've put that plug back in it, but you can still see where the hole used to be. I love to putt to those and watch how the ball breaks and reacts, and does it roll over top of that or not. What we can also do with something like the ghost hole is to put a ball marker down at where we think the apex of the break is going to be, using that to then pick a start line. And then as we hit those putts, seeing, does it actually break that way? If it doesn't, then let's adjust things around a little bit. Let's move that ball marker for the apex. Let's move the start line a little bit. Let's try to figure out what this putt exactly does. And just getting used to seeing those putts break and where that apex is are really going to help. Also, drills like short and high. So having a putt and trying to leave it short of the hole and on the high side of the break, but getting as close to the hole as possible is a really good way to start to really learn that putts can have a ton of break to them if we allow them to break, if we allow gravity to help the ball get to the hole. If we look at this chart again here, this graphic again here, is it possible on a short and high drill that we can get this ball to stop right at the very end of this line? That's kind of the goal of a drill like that on the high side here versus missing it low and left or long and high where we're hitting it too firm through that break. So the goal of a short and high drill is to try to get that ball as close to the hole as you can while still leaving it short and on the high side of the hole, so you can learn what that amount of break can truly look like. When we look at speed drills, we can still do games like short and high, and we can use those for speed drills as well as green reading drills. I think they work hand in hand really nicely. We can also do things like putting ladders and reverse putting ladders, where we're hitting a putt starting, at 5 feet and then hitting the next one 6 feet, 7 feet, and trying to just roll that ball a little bit past the next one, a little bit past the next one. You can do that from 0 to 12 feet to dial in the shorter ones, and you can do it as far out as 60 feet, 70 feet, however far you feel like you need to go to really dial in a distance. You can use a putting ladder to do that. You can also do a reverse putting ladder where you start putting it to the farthest distance, and then we're trying to leave the next putt just a little bit short of that and a little bit short of that. These drills are really hard. Most of us don't have a whole lot of awareness towards the true consistent speed that we're hitting our putts. Drills like this can start to bring a lot of awareness to that, and you're going to find yourself when you get out on the course that you're able to have much better control of your pace now that you've properly seen and assessed visually what the putt might do. You've felt what the putt might do. You've visualized where on the cup you want it to enter, what the apex of the break is, then what your start line is going to be, and we start matching that speed now up to it. And these putts just start going in and in and in, and if they're not going in, they're usually looking pretty good. Some other games we can do to start adding that pressure of being out on the course, because as we all know, we can go to the range and hit balls and hit putts and hit chips and do them pretty well. When we get out on the course and we got to total up our score at the end of the hole, at the end of the round, there's just something about that mentally makes it more challenging. So having some games that you can play can help to replicate some of that pressure. The first one won't replicate it as much. So this one's gonna be putt until you make, starting at usually about 10 feet and then going 5 feet back every time you make a putt. What makes this one challenging is as we start getting to those farther 30, 35, 40, 45, 50 foot putts, We typically put a time cap of like 30 or 45 minutes on this, and it usually gets pretty close to that time cap when we start getting to those longer putts. If we can visualize some of the break and apex and start lines and speeds, then we can really start to knock those putts in a little bit sooner and get used to seeing a ball go in from these further distances. Another really good putting game is going to be 18 holes where your goal is to two putt at worst on every hole. So you go around, you play 18 holes, varying from anywhere from 10 to 40 feet, and you're trying to two putt or make every putt. If you three putt, you start over from hole number one. So this adds that pressure up. I need to make sure I dial in my speed on that first putt, because if I two putt, I'm good. Even on 10 footer, right? If I two putt this 10 footer, that's fine. We don't want to three putt anything because we're starting to throw away strokes when we three putt. And for most amateur golfers, to shoot the best possible scores, we just need to chip and putt a little bit better. We can continue to spray the ball all over the golf course, but if you can get up around the green and get the ball in the hole in a couple strokes, you're going to see your scores plummet in a very, very positive way. So using some drills and games are really going to help out with that, especially when we focus them on reading the greens and matching speed to those lines, and then putting a little bit of pressure through these games. So in summary, if we can focus on these concepts and really dial them in, it's going to make your decisions on the greens way better. You're going to make more putts. You're going to be like Sam Burns. If you watched the Valspar this last weekend, he putted unbelievable, especially in pressure situations. Then in the playoff, matching speed to line perfectly. You can see the ball enters in 9 o'clock or almost even 10 o'clock, and then it lips into the hole because he's matched that speed to line so perfectly. So if we can dial this stuff in, we're going to see a big improvement in our putting and in our scores in general. So I hope this has been beneficial and helpful. If you are listening to this one, I would highly recommend to hop on our YouTube page and watch the video of this so you can see some of the visuals I'm talking about here. But otherwise, that'll be it for today's Putting Green Reading 101 seminar. Like I said, I hope this has been beneficial, and we will see you soon.